So I'd like to tell you that after World War II ended, that all the conflict in Europe ceased and everyone just sat around eating rainbow sandwiches. But no. In addition to all the violence going on in the Cold War, nationalist and separatist movements sprang up and put a kibosh on that peace, and I reckon we ought to talk about them. So if you're ready to get them brain cows milked, let's get to it. Now, if you've been around these AP Euro videos for any amount of time at all, it probably won't surprise you to hear that after World War II ended, nationalist uprisings occurred throughout Europe, and I'll mention two of them. But first, let me remind you that nationalism is a feeling of solidarity among people who speak the same language and share the same cultural history, which often results in those people wanting a separate state of their own. So the first nationalist movement I'll tell you about occurred in Chechnya, which is right here. The Chechen nationalist movement began among a group of Chechen Muslims who live in the southernmost region of Russia. Now, among this group, there was a profound anti-Russian sentiment that stretched back over 3 centuries, and when the Soviet Union fell in 1991, the Chechens declared independence and lived under their own government for about 3 years. And then in 1994, Russia decided to reassert its authority over the separatists and bring them back under their authority, even though Russia never acknowledged their independence to begin with. And that led to a series of deadly conflicts in which over 100,000 Chechens have been killed, and the conflict ended in 2017 with a Russian victory. And since then, Chechnya has been officially part of the Russian Federation. Now, the second nationalist movement to know occurred in Ireland. Now, right after World War I, Ireland was split into 2 separate nations, Ireland here and Northern Ireland here. And basically, you just need to know that this section was primarily Catholic and the North was primarily Protestant. The Protestant North wanted to remain loyal to Britain while the Catholic South wanted to become independent. Now, part of the violence that became known as the Troubles was caused by the fact that here there lived a Catholic minority and here there lived a Protestant minority. And in both places, but especially in the North, the minority was not granted the same rights as the majority. After a civil rights movement sprang up among the Catholics in Northern Ireland, the British sent in troops to crush the rebellion, which they absolutely did. However, in executing the leaders of this resistance movement, the British only further stoked anti-British resentment among the Catholic minority in the North and the Catholic majority of the South. Violence continued for decades, and in 1972, Northern Ireland came under direct British rule, which would last until 1998, a period punctuated with more violence. But the violence largely came to an end with the Good Friday Agreement signed in 1998, which granted more sovereignty to Northern Ireland. Okay, now various separatist movements also challenged the post-World War peace, and I'm going to tell you about 2 of those. First, the Basque separatist movement was a struggle on the eastern border of Spain in this region right here. The Basque is a group of about 2 million ethnically homogenous people who have long held anti-Spanish sentiment, and because of that, they have fought for decades for the right of self-determination and political independence from Spain. Now, the violent wing of this group is called the ETA. It was founded in 1959, and it engaged in bombings and assassinations and kidnapping in order to draw worldwide attention to their cause and pressure the Spanish government to recognize their independence. Now, ultimately, their efforts did not gain them independence, and they officially disbanded in 2018. Okay, now the second separatist movement to know is the Flemish separatist movement in Belgium. Essentially, Belgium consists of 2 major people groups, the Flemish in the north and the Walloons in the south. The Walloons, don't know. Anyway, they both speak different languages, and the majority of the power and wealth was concentrated in the south. As a result, the Flemish North, for most of the 20th century, staged movements to either become a separate nation or to be annexed by the Netherlands, with whom they are culturally similar. Now, the break has not yet occurred, but the tension has been there for a long time. Okay, and now let's consider the most devastating of the realities that broke the post-war peace, namely attempts at ethnic cleansing, and here we're going to focus on the Balkans. Now, by definition, ethnic cleansing describes the act of systematically killing members of an unwanted ethnic group, and this happened tragically in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Now, Bosnia-Herzegovina was part of Yugoslavia, which was a nation whose borders were drawn by the victorious powers of World War I. Like, the nation didn't exist, and then the people drawing up the treaties after the war were like, let's draw some borders right here just for fun. But the problem was that these borders were drawn without consideration of the various ethnic groups who lived within those borders, which were significant. Now, those tensions and differences didn't much matter under the leadership of Josip Tito, who ruled Yugoslavia with an iron fist from the end of World War II until 1980. Now, it's also important to know that Yugoslavia was made up of semi-autonomous republics which were bound together under Tito's rule. But upon Tito's death, each of those ethnic groups under the influence of a strong nationalism began agitating for their own nation, one of which was Bosnia-Herzegovina. Now, Slobodan Milosevic was the president of Serbia, and seeing this disorder, he sought to consolidate the various republics under his control. And when Bosnia-Herzegovina declared independence in 1992, things got hairy quick. Serbs were the minority population in the region, and it was Bosnian Muslims who made up the majority. And so in the name of protecting the Serbian minority, Milosevic sent Serbian troops into Bosnia-Herzegovina and carried out what was called ethnic cleansing, which is just another word for genocide against the Muslims. And Milosevic conducted large-scale murder of Bosnian Muslims, destroyed property, and herded the survivors into concentration camps. And by 1995, when NATO nations finally decided to intervene, almost 300,000 Serbians had been killed by this attempt at ethnic cleansing. Okay, click here to keep reviewing for Unit 9 of AP Euro. And click here to grab my AP Euro review pack, which is going to help you get an A in your class and a 5 on your exam in May. And I'll catch you on the flip-flop. Heimler out.